Welcome back. The EFF says it's proud of all South Africans who took part in yesterday's anti-Zuma marches, but the party was not involved in the demonstration. It plans to organise its own march next week. EFF spokesperson Buyiseni Ndlozi joins us now in studio with details on their reaction to yesterday's protests and the plan going forward. Buyiseni, a very good morning to you. Thank you for coming in. You say you are proud of South Africans for yesterday's marches. What exactly is it that makes you take such pride in South Africans?
Well, look, I think that the people who came out yesterday came out against all odds, against threats, firstly from the rank and file hooligans of the African National Congress, but also from the SERPs. And they came out in full force of unity, in people's power, to demonstrate that no amount of threats of violence could silence the people. We're proud because that is where the battle has to go now. It has to go to the streets. All South Africans have to be prepared to go and defend their democratic rights and to defend the country from the streets now, because those who are in power are not going to defend the country, and that's where we all have to now going forward be prepared to do, is to go to the streets in unity and call for the removal of Zuma. So we're very proud of everybody that came out yesterday, young and old, black and white, working class, middle class. We're proud, and as you said, the opposition parties are organizing another National Day of Action on Wednesday, the 12th of April, and we're requesting everybody once more to come out in their big numbers. Interesting
that you talk about this unity, and others are asking why, as some of the biggest critics of the president, didn't you join yesterday's demonstrations?
No. Many members of the EFF did join. And to that extent, the EFF was part, and we were in full support of the people's marches, and our members were indeed there. But we are part of a steering committee of all opposition parties for a united action on Wednesday. But also, as you know, on the 18th of April, we'll be in Parliament again, participating in the motion of no confidence, and yet again on that day there'll be demonstrations.
Why have you chosen Wednesday as the start of this rollout of mass action against the president?
Well, it's not the start. I mean, there have been demonstrations. It is us joining these demonstrations this Wednesday. Firstly, we don't want ubaba to have a proper birthday because he must question his reason of existence that day, particularly existence at the highest office in the country. And it's his birthday. We want to send a very strong message that we are not happy with the fact that you are alive. So if you want us to be happy with the fact that you are alive, you should vacate the office of the president and step down.
And we've seen these demonstrations, but some are saying, how then, what effect will they have when we've got an ANC that says we are standing by our man? We have senior ANC leaders saying that none of their members will vote for the president's removal should it come to that in Parliament, actually, when this debate or vote is had next week. So what then is the purpose of the mass demonstrations if the ANC is going to do all it can to keep its man in power?
Look, we've got to learn from history, as you know. That is what the apartheid leadership said as well, that it's not going to happen. That is what colonialists said in many different countries. It's not going to happen. That's what in the United States, towards the civil rights movement and Jim Crow, the leadership of the racists there kept saying it's not going to happen. If you want equality, go back to Africa. But the people kept demonstrating and shutting down the country. So they must not have a country to run. The reason why they are there is because they are running a country. But if we shut down the country, then through the street protests and demonstrations, then they have no country to run, and they will have to give in, just like the apartheid forces did. South Africans ought to know that we came to this particular democratic dispensation because of protests. Actually, across the world, imperialists across the world were brought kicking and screaming on the table to force sanctions on South Africa through demonstrations in sports boycotts, in cultural boycotts, academic boycotts, as well as consumer boycotts and stayaways. So the ANC ought to know that it's not indispensable. And they too can face the power of a united people. They will fall.
What is the likelihood then of these shutdowns, given that when the ministers briefed the country about the marches and the turnout. They put the number of people who are out in the streets across the country at around 60,000 in a country of over 50 million people. So just how long would it take to get to a point where you see the majority of the country then taken to the streets?
It has never happened. It is always a critical mass. It's hundreds and thousands of people who have always been able to take to the streets. There's always a silent majority, and its silence is taken as consent. So we can push and push and push until 500,000 or at least 1 million people take to the streets. Those underestimations is part of the propaganda war that we all have to be careful of. But we know in our hearts that we were many on the streets, and they can't sustain it. They can't sustain it. So if these peaceful demonstrations are not the only thing that can happen. There are occupations that can follow. There are stairways that can follow. And they ought to know there are boycotts that can follow. So there are all types of strategies that the masses can engage in. So they must not think that we can tire. The people of South Africa have, we are the protest capital of the world. We've got the capacity to remove a sitting government through protest only, not through the barrel of the gun. And therefore, no amount of propaganda, no amount of violence, no amount of hooligan violence for that matter. And we should state here that we're not shocked that the ANC went out, particularly those hooligans of the ANC went out calling themselves MKVA to go and beat up innocent South Africans. The ANC is known for killing each other. The ANC is known for, even in exile, the ANC killed more people, more black people in the townships and in exile than it did the murderous apartheid regime, army forces and the police. They are bloodthirsty for the blood of the innocent people. So the people of South Africa must be brave. We have to take to the streets and make sure that we save the country from being sold for a plate of curry.
The ANC Youth League, you've said, and the MKMVA have gone on record saying that they will protect the president, they will take to the streets to meet anyone who marches against President Jacob Zuma. And we know your history where there have been clashes between members of the EFF and some in the Youth League. How then do you ensure the safety of people who then say, look, I agree with what you're saying, I'd like to join you in these mass demonstrations, but I am concerned about how safe I will be?
Look, protest itself, look at the Fees Must Fall movement. What you do with protest is that you put your body at risk. That is the decision that you've got to take. That if I don't go out there, something worse is going to happen. Unemployment is going to rise even further than this. Food prices are going to rise. Bonds, car loans, student loans are going to skyrocket until our country is not just a junk status, but a true banana republic. So if I don't go out there and add the voice through the body, if I don't go and put that body on the street, a warm body, then it's not going to happen. So those are just threats. They are not many than us, those ANC Youth League people. And they cannot be more rowdy than us, who are also capable of being rowdy. But the people of South Africa ought to know that these threats are going to come, but you've got to take inspiration from the Fees Must Fall movement, take inspiration from us there in Parliament. They always pull us with our balls, but we go back to speak truth to the power. And you must take, inspiration from the likes of Ahmed Kathrada, the likes of Nelson Mandela, and all people who stood to make sure that this future that we are enjoying today is of a democratic dispensation.
So before I let you go, what you're saying, in short, is that violence cannot be avoided, or you can't give a guarantee that it will be avoided.
Violence will always be promised against those who speak the truth, particularly who are prepared to come out and put their bodies at risk. We've got to be brave, because they can't win if we are united and if we are many and if we are on the streets.
All right, and we're sending close the EFF spokesperson speaking to us there about the party's analysis or reaction to yesterday's mass demonstrations against President Jacob Zuma and their plans for a march against the president on his birthday next Wednesday.